Oh, we are back and off and running. Season 4 of Six Rotations starts now. Welcome in to our live episode to break down the AVCA preseason coaches poll, the top 25. Find it right here. And as always, he's Mick Haley. I'm Daniel Gilman, and we are brought to you by SNA Sports. Better equipment for a better game. We've got a lot of exciting news. We've got conference realignment to fill you in on. And of course, for the first time ever, Mick, a week 0 in college volleyball that will certainly rival some of the other big sports for some of these preseason matchups, as 4 of these top 10 teams will be meeting in Louisville in less than a week. And we are so ready, I guess, depending on when you watch it. And as we jump in, Mick, it's been a couple months since we chatted, and I just want to get a bit of a fill-in from you and your off season. And of course, a congratulations to the silver medalists from the United States of America out in Paris in those amazing Olympic Games. But Mick, Texas, defending champs, goes up and dominates Nebraska in the championship. We break it down. And since then, what has life been like for you?
Well, it's been pretty fun, especially with the Olympics. There's volleyball every week, every month. Went overseas a little bit, saw some volleyball there. This has not been a dead time. We've been active. Now we're going to, and the pro leagues, besides in the spring, we're very active, and that's going to pick up. We've got more volleyball than we can possibly talk about.
It was a ton of fun. I got to work with the Pro Volleyball Federation, covering the championship, doing a match, filling in for Paul over on CBS Sports in Omaha, the champs in that inaugural season. The question is, can the state of Nebraska back that up with a college title, a team that has just been kind of knocking on that door here the past few seasons for John Cook? We are going to see them in Louisville. And I just want to kind of kickstart this off with a bit of a sweepstakes that we are going to do. And we're going to have fun all season long. We have a new partner that I won't announce quite yet, but what I do want to do, and right off the bat, is go on to your mailing app, whatever it is, Gmail or through Google, and send an email to sixrotations@gmail.com and go ahead and send us. We've got 2 big matches on the First Serve Tuesday, brought to you by the AVCA. It's Nebraska-Kentucky, Wisconsin, and Louisville. Now, we're going to save all of our previewing for specific matches for next week. This is purely a poll reveal, but I want to give you guys a week here to send us who you think is going to win each match: Nebraska, Kentucky, Wisconsin, Louisville, and what you think the final score will be. And also, if you just want to include your email and your information, that's all going to be a part, and we will be getting back to you with some fun giveaways. And now, Mick, into season 4, we've got a little bit more support, we've got some love, and we want to send all of our love to you fans for tuning in last season and really ramping it up as we have been able to kind of grow this sport in whatever way we are trying to. And Mick, I know I'm kind of delaying here. You guys all want that top 25 poll, but I'm going to delay a little bit further because a bit of a recap, because of course Texas goes back to back. And of course Texas is going to be one of those teams to watch. Nebraska, they had a storyline filled offseason, Mick, and we're not a gossip column show. That's not what we're going to be getting into there, but there will certainly be fun storylines throughout this entire offseason. And without further ado, what I want to do is jump right into the 25 through 11. That's going to be the way that we will be revealing the polls every week, just like we did last season, and then we'll dissect the top 10. But one thing, Mick, that I want to ask you as we get ready to look at the 25 through 11 for this preseason AVCA coaches poll is, what do you think will be the biggest change for some of these teams having to move conferences? And let's go ahead and look at it now. And the first thing that I'm looking at here is a mixture of teams in the teens and into that early 20s that will be having to change conferences, because you've got Arizona State at 17. They are now in the Big 12. And of course, USC, the Trojans, who you took to the national championship, they are now in the Big 10 conference with UCLA, Oregon, and Washington. What are your initial thoughts coming into this season for some of these teams?
Well, I think it's going to be really enlightening for the teams, especially for all the teams that have to travel more. They have to prepare differently, and that's a given. Everybody understands that, I think, but doing it is another thing. So we'll be watching that for sure. There are some teams that are ranked in different positions that have changed personnel greatly. The addition of transfers, the addition of foreign players. Some people have decided to go just with freshmen in upgrading their teams. So that's going to be a difference also. If you go with foreign players, transportation is not going to make much of a difference. They know how to do that. If you go with transfers, maybe, maybe not. If you go with freshmen, that's a big deal. They don't know how to do this yet. So there's going to be some real learning curves in the first 30 days, I think, and we'll be right there watching and pointing out what we see.
Well, our 25th team that just ekes in, and I'll give you a couple of the honorable mentions as well. Georgia with 186 total points. And just to give you an idea, the team in number one spot has about 1,500 total points. So the points will divvy out based off of the coaches and how much they gave in recognition throughout the last week or so. And I want to give a massive shout out to our main man over at the AVCA, Pat Henderson, whose one job in the last couple weeks has turned into 10 jobs, because having to put together that first serve tournament and having to corral this top 25 poll, 26 through 30, Western Kentucky, Washington State. And yes, we don't really know what Washington State and what that's going to bring from a conference situation. WCC, obviously the Pac-12 is gone now, and then Houston, TCU, SMU. So three teams out of Texas, all just on the outside looking in. And Mick, I want to go through the 20 through 25 here. Florida State, USC, and then we've got some Midwest favorites that always seem to make noise, right? Dayton and then Marquette, and then Baylor and Georgia. And obviously Sophie Fisher had that massive season last year for the Dogs out in Athens. What team in this 20 to 25, aside, we know your love for USC, what team really stands out to you?
Well, I think that the conference has Marquette ahead of Creighton, and the coaches poll does not. There seems to be a lot of support for Marquette because they're returning 4 or 5 of their starting athletes. That's one that stands out to me. Baylor seems to be slipping. I honestly feel TCU is much stronger personnel-wise going into this season. So that'll be interesting to watch because the coaches haven't picked up on that at all or don't agree. And then in that bottom 5, if that's what you want to call it, you don't see Ohio State in that poll at all. And they have chosen to stick with the freshmen that they played last year, and they're going to be sophomores this year. So those are 3 things that I picked up on that I think you want to watch.
All right. And, obviously there were teams that had their dreams shattered towards the end of the season last year, but I think there was not one that felt like they were closer without much expectation than Arkansas. And that's a team that starts off our teens, right? The 15 through 19 with Tennessee, who was oh so close to reaching the Final Four. Just a tough loss out in the Sweet 16 for the Vols. BYU, are they going to be a favorite in the Big 12? That's a conference that has all of a sudden dropped in significance without Texas, and they are moving to the SEC with Oklahoma. But Mick, starting with Arkansas, and a team that is losing a ton of talent, and of course said goodbye to one of the best players in their program's history with Jill Gillen. And, I think as we look into Arkansas, Taylor Head as well made a move and only returning one of their All-Americans in Hannah Hogue. Do you feel like the SEC, and we look at Tennessee and Arkansas here, Tennessee just bringing back Caroline Kerr of their All-Americans, do we think that the SEC is going to be a conference that has the depth that they had last season?
No, I don't. I think the middle to bottom of that conference will be developing. It's not going to be a battle in the middle like it was last year. And I think you're going to see the top teams be better. There's going to be a war to see who's number 1 in the SEC. I think Arkansas is going to slip out of the top 25, quite honestly. I will see what they can do, but I think that's going to happen. I think you're going to see BYU maybe slide. We don't recognize any of the people that they're bringing in. It doesn't mean they're not good. It's just that we don't recognize them right now. And so you want to watch that. You want to watch Arizona State because I think they're going to be better. And I think Minnesota is a team that's got way more talent than their product produced last year, and they've got most of that talent back. I look for them to move up in that regard. And the dark horse here in the SEC is Florida State. ACC is Florida State, because people tell me that they're hiding some athletes that are really good and may make a breakout this year. So something to watch there.
Yeah, Florida State with the addition of Taylor Head, obviously Audrey Koenig returning, and you mentioned Minnesota. The second season always seems to be a pivotal one for a new head coach, and of course Keegan Cook, who made that heralded move. Now we'll see his former team in Washington joining the ranks of the Big Ten. And what we're going to do here, folks, is we are just going to try our best to get you reacclimated to the women's volleyball scene. Who is still playing, right? Madison Skinner, yes, she's back with Texas. That's a player looking for another national championship. Who is not returning? Who are some of the players that we will not be seeing what feels like for the first time in forever? No Asia O'Neal, Yalasheva with Washington State. Magda has moved on to the PVF. Skylar Fields with USC. Kendall Kipp with Stanford as well. They both went to the Pro Volleyball Federation. And I think a big one and a big loss, and you mentioned BYU, is Whitney Bauer, the setter, Aaron Livingston, our outside hitting friend of the program that came on last season. BYU has a lot of turnover, and of course, that second season into the Big 12 conference. I'm not too high on the Big 12. Obviously, you have that Texas vacancy, and you try to fill that with Colorado and Arizona State and Arizona, and we'll see how that can do. Meanwhile, we get a little bit closer to the top 10, and we're going to give it to you in just a moment, but we want to finish breaking down some of these teams. And I think the ACC, Mick, is geared up once again to be an absolute powerhouse. And you see Georgia Tech, number 14, Florida State, number 20, the only that we've seen so far on this ranking, but there are some big hitters to come in the top 10. Let's talk Georgia Tech and Coach Collier's squad, bringing back Bertolino and OTN, and I think bringing a home court advantage that is unheralded in the South, an area of the country that doesn't quite bring the atmosphere like the Midwest brings or the Texas area schools bring for volleyball. But I think GT can bring the pain, and will certainly be welcoming schools like Stanford and SMU to the group in Cal, the three new additions to the ACC.
Yeah, I think Georgia Tech is up there for one reason. They have 8 seniors and 3 juniors. That's 11 players that have played for 3 years or have been on the team for 3 years. They haven't brought in hardly any new talent that is exceptional, so they're going to go with what they've got. Now, this is a theme throughout. If you look at all of the teams, coaches have chosen to either stand pat with what they've got, train in the spring and get better, or they've chosen to add, and bring in a whole new group to add with what they've got. So we got 2 different philosophies going on. It's going to be fun to watch during the year to see whose philosophy is really working. I already pointed out Ohio State seems to be staying with freshmen and developing them. Arizona's added some people, Georgia Tech staying with their players. But what are they going to do next year? Well, we don't worry about that right now because they want to win this year. So that's what you pointed out there. So I think those are some really good things to watch. I think the team that the coaches seem to be fired up about is Kansas. Now, Kansas has some good athletes. They're a Big 12 team. They're picked to win the Big 12 now. They have never really flourished around the top 10 very much. They've usually been somewhere between 15 and 25. Maybe that's because they've always been behind Texas in that conference. But right now, they are out there. They're being projected to lead their conference. It'll be interesting to see how they handle it.
You know what? We're in mid-season form with the segues, Mick, because you took us right from 14 to 13 beautifully there. I do think that Kansas has what it takes. I think they have the most poise setter in the conference, probably a top 10 setter in all of college volleyball with Cameron Turner. She is now an upperclassman with some experience and some big arms in Al Nadi and Cameron Turner as well. And of course, they say goodbye to Reagan Cooper, who went pro. She won Rookie of the Year in the Pro Volleyball Federation. And it's just so fun now to kind of tie in and imagine next year when we'll have two leagues that can kind of tie in some of our concepts to see how these rookies do. And for those that are curious, from what I'm hearing, is of course there will be another PVF draft coming in December, most likely that same weekend of the Final Four. What I'm also hearing, and this is unconfirmed, is that the Love setup will have one player available for each team to grab from college. So that's kind of the word on the street right now for those curious about moving from college into the pro. So both leagues will have opportunities for our top players. And we haven't quite talked about all of them, but I think one of the top players in all of college volleyball, Mick, is from the University of Florida. And I think Kennedy Martin, if she can get that connection again with Alexis Stuckey, who had that horrific pre-conference injury, the setter for the University of Florida, who blew out her knee last season, those two could almost, not single-handedly, but two-handedly carry the Gators into what will be a brutal SEC conference as Florida sits 11. I'm not sure what you think. Where do you feel like the SEC is going to rank this year? I know you mentioned it's not going to be as deep, but the top heavy, right, with Texas and Florida and Kentucky would certainly be fun.
Yeah, I think that combination of Texas, Kentucky, and Florida is probably going to lead the SEC. Like I said, there's going to be a dark horse jump in there, but those three are who you want to watch. Texas is going to be in the top group, 1, 2, or 3, I believe, just their talent alone. They have 8 players over 6'3" in size, so they're massive as far as size, and they can play. That's even a bigger thing. So Kentucky is the one that I don't know about. We know that if Stuckey is healthy, she can run Martin. They have got a Terminator. When you have a Terminator, you win those 5-set matches. Kentucky, we don't know who the Terminator is going to be. They've been working on their net defense, blocking. They have a blocking coach there that is probably the best in the country, or one of the best in the country. So I look for Kentucky to dominate the net. But those 3 are going to be very interesting to watch.
All right, we made you wait. Mick has brought up Kentucky, which means we are going to carry you into the top 10. Here we sit, the AVCA 2024 preseason coaches top 10, and Kentucky sitting at 9. We'll get to the bottom, but we have to talk up at the top. Defending 2-time champ, 47 of the potential 61 first place votes go to the Texas Longhorns, and UT bringing back the setter power combination of Skinner and Swindle. Reagan Rutherford, the addition from Kentucky, moves down to Austin and matches up again with just a powerhouse coaching situation with Jared Elliott. And I think that the back row depth as well, Akana and Halter. And of course, I chatted with Halter during the season last year. She is a bundle of joy to chat with. And you know what? It's just a very likable top 10. You go through these teams, and we are excited to see some of them as well. 2 and 3, both out of the Big Ten Conference, both those big red hitters who reached the Final Four last season. And of course, Wisconsin fell in 4 sets to Texas, and then Nebraska swept by the Longhorns in the final. Mick, we've got Nebraska, Wisconsin, Louisville, and Kentucky. 4 teams out of the top 10. And we get to see them in Louisville on next Tuesday.
Yeah, and Louisville, I think, is the one you want to watch. You want to see if they're top 4 worthy. They haven't really brought in somebody that can take over and score points. So I want to know how they're going to win, and I think they're looking at the improvements they made this spring, and the improvements of the individual players to go against this other top 3 group. If they can do well in this get together coming up next week, think about it. Then they're going to push somebody in that top 4 spot, and then we're going to have some talking things to put out there, because Louisville's got to play well to start with, or they're going to be somewhere between 5 and 9, I think, for a long time.
Well, the advantage here, Mick, is they get to play at home. The KFC Yum Center and the prime time matchup. So Nebraska-Kentucky will play at 7 Eastern. Around 8:30, we'll see Wisconsin and Louisville. And let's just go over a few of the returners from these four teams as we highlight the AVCA First Serve Showcase. And for Louisville, the super senior Anna DeBeer is back with Charity Looper, Elena Scott, and another All-American in Kara Cressy. And of course, I don't think we have to go too far to find where Wisconsin's talent is going to gravitate from, because Sarah Franklin, the AVCA Player of the Year, is back. She's ready. Emily Eman had an awesome comparison in an article that kind of highlighted the Fox matchups this season, and the Fox Sports gang headed out to the Big Ten Media Days earlier this month, where Franklin is her comp to be the closest to a Caitlin Clark character. And I think what that does, and I love Emily, and I think, just getting any sort of buzz around this sport, is that'll get other teams saying, wait a minute, we probably have a player that can make a little bit more noise than Sarah Franklin. Let's see if our players can step up. And Mick, Carter Booth, as well as Anna Smrek once again. And the question is 5-1 or 6-2 for Kelly Sheffield's crew, who will be on Fox next Sunday, September 1st, against Texas in a showcase in Milwaukee, with 2 games on Fox, Wisconsin versus Texas, Wisconsin versus Stanford. The Badgers are going to have plenty of time to prove themselves or falter under the pressure.
Yeah, and we want to see what Stanford comes back with too, because those matches will be really armchair matches. You want to get your seat in front of your TV if you're not going up there. But honestly, I know people from Austin that are flying up there to watch those matches.
Let's talk about Stanford, Mick. They make the move from the Pac-12 conference, where they were reigning dominant leaders, and they have so much coming back. They lose Katie Baird and Kendall Kipp, but I don't think it's going to be much of an issue for Hambly's crew. The issue will be that travel grind, because Stanford will be making trips east as often as possible, joining that Atlantic Coast Conference with returners. And we've talked to Cammie Miner, and we know that she's got what it takes to be one of the best setters in all of volleyball. Of course, Ogilvy in the back row with Elia Rubin and Sammy Francis are those returning All-Americans. And as we talk Stanford, we talk Pittsburgh, who sits one spot ahead of them in the 4. And Mick, I want to give you a fun fact. There is no team in all of college volleyball, aside from Pitt, that has reached 3 straight Final Fours. What Dan Fisher has done, and I will still call it under the radar, is so impressive, but the coaches are giving him his due this season. A preseason pick of 4, Rachel Fairbanks with the super senior season, and Olivia Babcock going into that sophomore campaign with her, explosive arm.
Well, I will tell you one thing from my coaching days. We were very lucky in the mid-'80s to go to the Final Four 3 times, and we won the 4th time going away. And that experience, if those players get that experience, they will be as comfortable as any team out there other than Texas going to the Final Four, maybe even Nebraska, but and Wisconsin. I mean, you're looking at this. I think that's what the coaches are looking at. They really feel Pittsburgh's in the hunt here, especially with the people they picked up now to go with that crew. And they've got one of the best terminators also in the country that not only hurts you with the attack, but hurts you with the serve. That top spin, aggressive, high velocity serve is more like the men, and it's going to keep people out of system. And so Pittsburgh, I'm sure, is loading up on playing good net defense and going to try to terminate out of system and win those matches with that serve.
They will have a tall task on opening weekend. They travel to Eugene to face Oregon next Friday on Big Ten Network. Now, next week's episode, we will be diving into the opening matchups. We're just kind of teasing those here on today's Reveal podcast. And I think, Mick, it's time, right? The Nebraska fans have waited long enough. We got a lot of love from the UNL supporters last season. And I think, we have to talk about what is the strongest team on paper. I just want to go over these All-Americans that Nebraska has, and the addition, of course, of Taylor Landfair. But you've got Merritt Beeson, Lexi Rodriguez, Bergen Riley, probably the best 1, 2, 3 on paper in all of college volleyball. Unquestioned going into this season, Nebraska coming off of getting so close to the mountain, but getting humbled in the final match, having Harper Murray come back and say, well, we're just going to win every match and every championship from here on out. The bulletin board material is up, Mick, and let's go over a few of these returners. Beeson, Murray, Rodriguez, Riley, and then they add Taylor Landfair. I don't think there's a better team, at least on paper, going into this season.
Well, I think that's probably true. Although if you match them up with Texas right away, you've got Lowenstein pushing for a starting spot, transferring from Nebraska. You've got a freshman and sophomore middle, which at Texas, which gives Nebraska, I think, the advantage early in experience. The thing that Texas picks up to match with Nebraska's big left side coming in from Minnesota is that they pick up Rutherford from Kentucky on the right to pick up kills there. So the question is, Swindle going to be able to set behind better this year, or is the setter from Baylor who transferred into Texas, is she going to challenge for the starting position? Or are they going to go to a 6-2 also and try to match up with the power that Nebraska has? Because they're now going to be able to terminate from left or right, Beeson on the right, Landfair on the left. I mean, it's going to be a war out there, and we're just not going to see enough matches of these two against each other. So you better get your tickets to the Final Four because they're both going to be there.
Yep, Final Four in Louisville, but first we'll see Nebraska in Louisville, and I promise there will be plenty of different shades of red with Nebraska against Kentucky. There's no doubt who the Red fans in attendance there will be rooting for. And in that matchup, and we could talk a little bit of Kentucky as well, I want to know what you're looking for from Nebraska. Is it going to be that cohesiveness? They always seem to struggle early in the season, and yet towards the end of the year, it is always Nebraska and Wisconsin, 1 and 2 in the Big Ten Conference. And I don't think that Purdue has the firepower, right? Let's call them the third team this season, according to our coaches at least. And Penn State right there as well, 3 and 4, Penn State and Purdue in the Big Ten. Are they going to have enough firepower to keep up with the two red teams atop?
Well, Chacon and Hudson can score. That may be two of the best left side attack combinations out there. It just depends on if they've developed any point scoring from the right side and the middle. I think Purdue's ahead of Penn State, quite honestly. I don't see Penn State has improved except in the gym training their players. And of course, trying to get Muzak to really be a Terminator like those two from Purdue. So it will be interesting. I think Purdue's an interesting watch. I think Minnesota is, like I said, was way down. I think they can play with those teams. They can't play probably with Wisconsin and Nebraska, but they can play with everybody else there.
Okay, so of course, once again, we're going to try to talk about every team. We're doing our best here, but I do want to get a little bit of a conference breakdown from you, Mick, here in this moment, because as we look at the top 10 and you see that combination of the Big Ten, right? 2, 3, 7, 8, 10 from the Big Ten Conference with Oregon rounding that out. But then you've got the SEC, right? With Texas and Kentucky. Is it the ACC at 4, 5, and 6 that really take your eye and say, you know what, this is the conference to be? Where do you put the rankings of conferences?
Well, that's a really good question because I think the Big Ten has two of the top 4 teams, and they may have three of the top 5 teams, but the ACC has Pitt, Stanford, and Louisville, and dark horse Georgia Tech, who's going to try to come in there and play with what they have. You've got Texas, Kentucky, and Florida in the SEC. Kansas, I just don't think breaks into that top 10. And what I see in the Big Ten is I see Nebraska, Wisconsin, and then I see 4 teams battling. I see Minnesota, Purdue, Penn State, and Oregon all just kicking the living daylights out of each other to try to get that 3rd spot. So there you've got 9 teams, top 3 in the top 10. Who's going to break in the top 10 as that 10th team? So it's pretty interesting as far as I see the conferences right now.
And it's going to take a few minutes, right? To really take a few weeks probably to remember, hey, Stanford, ACC, Texas, SEC. These are things that we have to start really having soaked in. UCLA, Big Ten, new coach, new mentality, new philosophy here in the last 2 years for these schools in Los Angeles. And maybe the journey of forcing, a Midwest team to have to go out to LA or go up to Seattle and face a tough Washington team with their second-year head coach as well is going to be something that I'm very excited about. I do feel like Penn State is getting a lot of love here, and they're definitely a school that has arisen when the doubters are there. And I think last season was the key, right? Everyone thought Penn State was just going to have that really, really tough rebuild season, and they were right there in the middle of the hunt for most of the season. And so here the coaches give Cauley that love in the top 10 with the 7 spot. The question is, can Dave Shondell get over the hump? Can certain teams, like we've seen Louisville now knock on the door in 2 of the last 3 Final Fours, can Danny Busboom Kelly finally put together the team that has the 5 pieces that can fully grab that championship ring? And Mick, I'm really excited. I feel like this was a pretty solid ranking. Do you feel like there are any team names here that are way off the ranking that you would have given them?
Well, I would have had TCU in the top 25. I think their addition of Para, who transferred from Texas up there a year ago,
Got Melanie
now
Parra.
yeah, Para. She's a Terminator. She can play. They've added some pieces. They're going to make some noise. I would tell you, you mentioned something I think is really important. The people traveling to the West Coast, UCLA has added some really nice pieces. They are going to be somebody you have to deal with when you're on the road in Los Angeles. USC, I want to see what they've done. They're going to change their offense. They're going to be a much faster team without Skylar Fields, but they have to replace 5 points per set that Skylar Fields gave to them, and I don't know where they're going to get those points yet. So, but people have to travel there. They don't have to travel. They, on the other hand, have got lots of problems when they have to travel to the Big Ten schools out in the Midwest. And they're going to have to learn how to do that because it's not going to be glitzy. It's going to be absolutely you just trudging in the snow and going after it. So there's going to be a lot of learning going on there. As far as teams, I just think Minnesota is going to be better than they're ranked here. I think Creighton is ranked too high. Even though I like their outsides, I like those players. The coaches think Marquette's going to win that conference. So they've got Marquette at 23, but they've got Creighton at 12. That looks like last year's rankings to me. So those are some things that I pick out there. And then we mentioned BYU. We just don't know if BYU is going to be a top 25 team or not.
I like Creighton. I think, Nora Sis is someone that has exploded when healthy, and Ava Martin is a returning All-American as well as,
Yep.
as Kendra Wade. It's just another one of those situations, Mick, where it's like if they don't schedule like these other teams are scheduling, and I'm looking at the first couple weekends and Creighton's not jumping out as one of our marquee matches, they kind of you just don't really get the airtime that some of these schools that earn the schedule love are going to get from us. But we'll keep eyes obviously on Creighton and Marquette. It feels like the same year. This is our 4th year, and each of the last 3, Creighton and Marquette just stay in the top 25. They play each other 3 times. The 3rd time is always the championship match, and then they go decently far. Creighton lost in 5 sets in the Sweet 16. They were right there, but just not enough against Louisville. I will end it. I will say one team, you're calling it TCU. I'm going to say Kansas State is going to be my dark horse in the Big 12 conference. I've talked to Big 12 coaches. I've called Big 12 volleyball here in the last 2 years. Coaches hate going to Manhattan. They do not like it at all. It is a very tough place to play. And then the arm of Aaliyah Carter is something that I am very excited to see here in another season, coming off of an All-American campaign from Kansas State. That's a team that I think is going to make some noise. Houston as well could be a bit of a dark horse. And I think I could be kind of locked in for some of these middle tier Big 12 matches. That could be a conference, Mick, that I'm very excited about. Well, I'm really excited to just kind of break it all down with you, Mick. I hope you guys all enjoyed the episode. Now, Mick, Tuesday, end of August, Louisville's the spot. Are you thinking that these matches are going to be mid-season level of competition? These ladies are going to be ready to roll, or will there be a little bit of rust that has to be shaken in the beginning of this massive? Because they're not in a volleyball arena, right? They're playing in a basketball arena, and there's always the little things that you got to get used to of those.
Usually the first week or two, they play pretty well. It starts breaking down when the expectation is to play like that. They'll play with a lot of energy, a lot of emotion. Sometimes there'll be errors that are made, but most of these teams that you're going to see play in this tournament are experienced veterans and only adding a few rookies. So they usually play at a pretty high level, and it's really worth getting a ticket to this one because you're going to see some good play. I have not seen early matches played like this with this kind of attention where the teams don't play well.
Well, we cannot wait for it. We'll have another episode that breaks down our preview of the opening week. But remember, email us 6rotations@gmail.com who you think will win each of the two matches, how long you think the match will go, 3 sets, 4 sets, or maybe we will get lucky with some awesome 5-setters in Louisville. And also comment, subscribe, and share. Let us know what you think of the top 25. Where did Mick and I make mistakes? We always love to hear your criticisms. As always, he's Mick, I'm Daniel, and this is 6 Rotations.